What is it about
Okay.
invading their country in particular versus bombing their country in particular that causes suicide, terrorist attacks from your research? Like, what is it? Because bombing them from the sky is killing people.
It's not the killing people part of this that matters. It's the political control part that comes with the ground forces. So the reason to use the ground forces is to impose political control.
So
That's not just killing people, Stephen.
So the reason why America put in ground forces
is to get political control. And that political control means the group controlled doesn't control its way of life.
it's this sort of seen as a deeper violation. Is that ultimately what it is?
It's a deeper violation that is not in control of the local population. So when we put in ground forces in Afghanistan after we toppled the Taliban, we toppled the Taliban with air power, by the way, but we don't get much suicide attacks in Afghanistan till we start pouring in ground forces in Afghanistan. That comes after we topple the Taliban. So we topple the Taliban in fall 2021. And then we get the suicide terrorism starting several years later in Afghanistan. It's because that's when we're putting in the ground force.
The strongest point here is that ground forces are framed as the real trigger for suicide terrorism, because they mean political control, not just more deaths. That distinction is sharp, and it fits the Afghanistan example being used. Bombing alone is treated differently from a foreign army trying to run local life. But the argument leans hard on one causal chain and treats Afghanistan as a clean proof, even though the transcript does not unpack other conflict conditions that could also shape attacks. The consequence of this view is stark. If political domination is what people resist most, then occupation can become more radicalizing than destruction from the air.
Place B and why?
I think the key person I would ask would be Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He died before we dropped the atomic bombs. I would want to know from him, when he was developing and supporting the atomic bombs, did he imagine the world that would be created by the atomic bombs? Because in my lifetime, war has been a defining feature of my work, but the prospects of nuclear war have always overhung quite a bit of our work. We never want to get to anything like that, but I'd like to know from the person who had the most authority, power in order to make that future happen, who never even saw it, didn't even see it happen, but knew it was coming. I'd like to know from him, what did he think was truly going to come? Because I think that this would be extremely useful to know whether or not our leaders truly, how far out they can really see and understand how much their decisions today shape the world for decades to come.
Robert, thank you.
The strongest point here is the demand to ask leaders whether they really understood the long shadow of the atomic bomb. That is a serious test of political foresight, because it shifts the question from whether they won the war to whether they could imagine the world they were creating. But the argument assumes that the decisive issue is what one leader thought, when the transcript itself shows a broader concern with how far any leader can see the downstream effects of power. It also leaves out the hard possibility that leaders may understand danger and still choose it, which makes foresight only part of the story. The real pressure here is on responsibility. Decisions made in one moment can lock in decades of fear.
It's just up, actually, it's just up, so yes.
I have to say, when we first sat down, you said a bunch of things in terms of what would happen next, and I'm not sure I believed them all, because I don't know anything about war. And you never really think about the psychology changes, both at home, but also where the bombs are dropping. And it does appear that you've been largely correct about what you said would happen, this escalation that happens across all wars, that has happened also in Ukraine and Russia at the same time, but now we're seeing play out in Iran. So I have to give you your credit, because you have been Unfortunately, you've been right, I should say.
I would agree with the word unfortunate.
The strongest point here is the blunt admission that the earlier warnings have mostly come true, especially about escalation and the psychology of war. That gives the prior analysis credibility because it is being checked against events in real time, not just defended in theory. But the credit is also cautious, and rightly so, because largely correct does not mean every prediction was right or that the causes are settled. The transcript points to chaos in Iran and echoes from Ukraine and Russia, yet it does not spell out which mechanisms are shared across those wars. The force of the comment is in the humility. War has a way of proving the pessimists less wrong than everyone hoped.